morning, everybody. Welcome to Hawk Talk. It is that Blue Friday. We have the Eagles coming up on Monday, whether you're on the East Coast, West Coast, or around the world. Thank you for joining us. Grab some coffee, hang out. Let's talk some Seahawks. This show is brought to you by Archer Ducks right here in the Seattle area. If you haven't had your duck cleaning done in the last year, it's probably a good time to get it done, especially with people coming in and out of the house. It tends to stir up allergens, and good to have those ducts clean annually. And of course, if you haven't had your dryer duct done, that one should definitely be done at least annually, just because there's more than 15,000 dryer fires every year because of lint in those dryer ducts. You can book your appointment right there on Archer Ducts on Facebook. All right, let's get rolling. On a side note, I drink a lot of coffee, so if there's a coffee sponsor that wants to come out, I would greatly appreciate it. All right, so we take a look at this Niners game, and unfortunately it was kind of what you thought it might be. The Niners are, not only are they healthy, but they're just clicking on all cylinders. They have come out and beat up on teams. As far as the eye test, they are probably the best team in the league right now. And in the first half, the Seahawks gave them everything they could handle. It was a really good start to the game. Outside of that first play from CMC, takes it 72 yards down the field. They, basically immediately punch it in. And then the Seahawks gather themselves. They come right back down the field. They score. They come back down again, get a field goal. And then, of course, the Niners put up, Debo gets in the end zone just before half. And we go into the half 14-10. This looks like a nice game. It's a divisional game, so it's a battle for sure. Then it kind of starts to slip away from there. They come into the third quarter, and Debo gets another score. Unfortunately, it became a little bit out of range from then. The Seahawks did ultimately go down the field, score again, miss the 2-point conversion, and then it was kind of a crazy sequence because the two teams put up a ton of points within about 3 minutes. San Fran scored there at the end of the third. And then, of course, the Hawks score, and then they come right back, and Kittle gets in the end zone also. That's really where it kind of ended up. And then, of course, you end up with the DK shenanigans where he gets booted from the game, another unsportsmanlike conduct. And you can argue it either way. Obviously he got hit in the back after suplexing, on the turnover. I have no doubt that he didn't know that he had pitched the ball away. So I don't really fault DK on that end of it. Obviously he gets hit in the back. But if you've watched football for more than 5 minutes, you know that the second guy is always the guy that gets the flag, gets the ejection if it happens. And so he runs after him, grabs his face mask. It becomes the issue that we've seen too many times. And, then one of the Niners comes up and shoves him. Both of them get ejected. And I get why he was mad, and I get wanting to retaliate. But you're trying to get back in the football game. Now, we just threw a pick, and it just about iced it anyway. But at the end of the day, you gotta protect not just, you got to be better for your team, right? At the end of the day, I absolutely get wanting to go after the guy, but it doesn't help you. It doesn't help the team. You really can't help the team if you're ejected from the game. So that's kind of one of the things that really stuck out as far as this one was put together. It was just, it was a comedy of errors in the second half. Drew Lock throws a couple of picks, and really that's all she wrote at that point. But the first half was very competitive. You really felt like there was a chance they could pull that game out. And then in the second half, coverages broke down, undisciplined play started to happen. Obviously DK gets booted, a couple of picks happen. All of a sudden, just everything that they were doing relatively well in the first half, really kind of came off the rails. Now, not as bad as Thursday night's game. If you didn't see that, man, talk about an absolute beatdown, 63-21. Chargers just got smoked by the Raiders. And, it's interesting that we've had two of those types of games this year because, obviously you had the Broncos get smoked by the Dolphins as well. So two of these insanely high score games have been in the AFC West, which is crazy. But, I would have to think that Staley finally gets fired after that. Now, obviously, this is the Seahawks show, but man, that was just an absolute beatdown last night. So kind of had to talk about it. Also, if you came out yesterday to watch the game with us, thanks for stopping by. Very cool. We went to the Legion Sports Bar right there in Bellevue. That's the one that Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman and Leilani Wong all opened together. And we were fortunate enough that Chancellor was in the house. So we got to chat with him a little bit, which was very cool. And so hopefully we can interview them sometime and talk about their new restaurant. But if you haven't been, definitely go. Cool spot. Got a nice vibe to it. Check us out on Twitter. You can see some of the pictures from inside. And so anyway, we'll get going. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this Niners game just because, I mean, it was a story of two halves. And unfortunately, we've seen this movie a few times. It was both the Rams games were that way, real competitive in the first half. And then the rails, kind of came off the rails in the second half. The Bengals game, similar, real competitive in the first half. In fact, statistically, they got, they were in the lead of everything on that game with the exception of the scoreboard, which is the only one that matters, right? But that was another second half letdown. This is where, when we talk about this Eagles game coming up, it's my real concern. So we'll get to that. We do have quite a few questions this morning. So again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this Niners game. Let's go ahead and get into some of these questions. So are the Hawks' offensive woes fixable? Yes. Are they fixable for this season? That is a real question. And I don't know that they necessarily are. And it has nothing to do with play calling, really. It really has to do with the inconsistent offensive line play. Now, there's been a ton of injuries. And even the guys that have come back are still injured. They're just kind of battling through. Naturally, last week, we didn't have Geno. Drew Lock was in. He kind of had sort of a mixed bag. He had, it was like, I want to say it was around 250 yards and a couple of touchdowns, but then also had a couple of picks. So, some of those if without the picks, that stat line looks pretty good. With the picks, obviously that's how you lose games. Turnovers are a killer. So is it fixable? Absolutely. I think Waldron can do more than he's done so far. If you just look at how they operated last season when the offensive line was healthy, and there was actually less weapons last year than there is this year. So when you look at it from that front, it's definitely fixable. You just need all your guys back. And it's just, unfortunately, something that they haven't been able to do. There's been a lot of hate going towards Waldron and Geno for not being able to get it done. But you got to remember, if you look at last season, what other teams had offensive lines that were basically a rotating cast. They never had their starting five that they wanted. And that was the Rams and the Cardinals, right? And nobody's going to dispute the fact that Stafford is a great quarterback and Kyler Murray can get it done. But what did their stats look like last year, and what did their team look like last year when they didn't have an offensive line that was able to protect them? Yeah, it looked like they didn't remember how to call offensive plays, and the stats were way down. Ultimately, both of them end up getting hurt. So, I mean, if you don't have the guys you want in the trenches in front of you, I don't care how good your skill players are, you don't have enough time to get them the ball. So let's pump the brakes a little bit on the fire, everybody, and let's calm down. We've had a lot of injuries. Does that suck for this season? Of course, it's unfortunate, but injuries are part of the game. It's ultimately what took the Ravens out of it last year as well, right? They had a bunch of injuries. Then Lamar gets hurt, and it essentially ends their season on something that they probably could have won their division with. Even though everybody loves the Bengals, the Ravens have a very good team. So when you look at all of that, is the offensive problems fixable? Of course, even with the cast that they currently have, because all of these guys are young, their contracts are in place. So you're going to be able to run most of these guys back next year anyway. And, so if you can get your guys up front healthy, then yes, absolutely. This can be the, one of the top scoring offenses that it was last year, right? I mean, until everybody started getting hurt at the end of the season, you got to remember they were a top 5 scoring offense most of the season. So the defense was questionable, but the offense was putting up points. So is it fixable? Absolutely. And is it fixable for this season? Probably not, because who are you going to get on the offensive line? One of the guys that I thought they should have tried to go get was DJ Fluker, just got picked up by the Raiders. So great pickup for them. Kudos to Fluker finding his way back into the league. It was awesome. So unfortunately, the Hawks really could have used that skill, but they didn't pull the trigger on it. But that being said, it is fixable. So that was a long way to answer your question. So should they bring back Waldron? Sure. I mean, again, I don't know who you're going to get instead anyway, but I can't really fault this guy. He's having to draw up blocking schemes for Geno and Locke last week against incredible pass rushes. And he's having to do it with, Band-Aids and zip ties for an offensive line, because again, even the guys that have come back are still dealing with injuries. They've been mostly on the injury report every week anyway, despite being back on the field. So it's not like he has guys that are, rested and, not beat up. Like, everybody's nicked up a little bit, but I mean, these guys have missed significant time and have come back early to try and help. You can't fault the guy for having a less dynamic offense when he's having to use the resources that could make it dynamic on the field to help in blocking schemes, like adding, extra tight ends and stuff like that. So, I mean, all of a sudden you're bringing these guys in. Well, what's that limit? Well, it limits your throwing to the outside and through the middle, because they're in there trying to help with the pick up the pass rush. So, I mean, as much as you might hate on Waldron, there's only so much he can do because you only have the 11 guys. And if you got to limit some of your outlet passes and everything to bring those guys in to help block, all of a sudden your options after the ball snapped, it goes way down, right? So instead of having, 3 receivers, a couple tight ends, whatever, now all of a sudden you have 3 receivers in the route. Your tight ends are in to help block. A lot of times your running back is helping pick up a pass rusher. You might have one of those guys leak out, but if they're still getting through, you don't even have time for a leak out pass. So now all of a sudden you need JSN on a dig or Lockett on an out. You probably don't even have enough time to hit DK down the seam just because of how long that play takes to develop. So should Waldron come back? I mean, it'd be tough to want to fire him in a situation where he really didn't have quality blocking in front of the quarterback in front of him. So yeah, I would say unless something amazing popped up, there's no reason to move on. That being said, if the season closes out in kind of an ugly fashion, he may be one of the guys that ends up down the road. Do I think it's his fault? Not really. But, that's also kind of how football works. If you're not performing, or at least it doesn't show up in the win column, you end up down the road. And you can be very average. And as long as it's ending up in the win column, you can keep your job for a long time. Darrell Bevell was a prime example of that. The only time you saw real creative stuff out of Darrell Bevell is when he had everybody hurt. He'd dial up some stuff that you're just like, wow, where is this? Like the rest of the time. But as soon as he had his full complement of guys, it was always just a very vanilla offense, but it ended up winning, right? So he got to keep his job for a long time. So should they bring him back? Yeah, again, unless something amazing pops up, yeah, absolutely bring him back. Is this Geno's last season as a Hawk? I doubt it. It doesn't even make sense to do that. You have so you have Geno. He still played fairly well despite not having a great offensive line, even though his sack numbers aren't through the roof. His quarterback hurries are crazy. So again, that offensive line is pushing him off his spot, and he's not that guy, right? Like he's a good quarterback. He makes smart decisions with the ball when he has time. So what you need is a nice offensive line in front of him that's not too dissimilar to the Jared Goffs and the Matt Ryans and those kinds of quarterbacks. Like they need that protection. They're not going to be able to do the Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes. Like they can't put the ball on their back and go win a game for you. He needs his guys to function, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's half the league, right? And they call it a game manager, but and they say it in a negative way. But I would rather have a guy that is smart with the ball and consistent. I know what I'm going to get out of him week in and week out, than maybe a Josh Allen where he can come out and he's going to throw 4 touchdowns and absolutely crush the game. Or the next week he's going to go and throw 4 picks and absolutely lose you the game. You know, it's kind of the newer version of Brett Favre. Brett Favre was a blast to watch. He would have been stressful if he was on my favorite team. So, yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the quote unquote game manager. They tend to win a lot of games. I mean, look at Jimmy G. You can't tell me that his win stat is because of him, right? But he's on those teams when they win. So, I mean, and you can always look at it as, oh man, he's going to do a Jimmy G thing, and you're not wrong. Like he absolutely was going to do some of those things, but for whatever reason, even when he wasn't really a factor, when he was on the teams, they find ways to win. So it's I don't think it'll be Geno's last year. The contract is very team friendly. There's outs after every year. Drew Lock is probably actually the bigger question mark on whether or not he'll be back. All right. Is Pete untouchable before the end of his contract in 25? Absolutely he is. You know, there's only a year left. There's one season, right? I seriously doubt they move off him, especially because, you know, legacy-wise, I don't see them moving off him on his last year. Plus, it's a situation where the ownership group isn't necessarily as involved as it was when it was Paul Allen. You know, this is one where I think everybody plays out their contract, and then they probably move on from there. They probably move on from Pete. They probably move on from Schneider. That's probably about when they start looking at selling the team, at least floating it out there, trying to see what kind of money would they be looking at. I would imagine that the Seahawks probably end up going for, you know, somewhere in that like $6 billion range, because, you know, football teams are crazy. But yeah, I would say he's relatively untouchable at this point. He's won too many games, and, you know, there's only 1 year left. If there was 5 years left or 4 years left or whatever, say he just signed a 4-year or a 5-year, and this was his first year of it, then you have a real question, right? You know, they would probably still let him run it back with the talent they have and be like, okay, let's get guys healthy and see if this is really kind of the path that we want to be on. But with only 1 year left, they're not going to move off him. They're going to go ahead and let him close out his contract, which is, I mean, honestly, probably the right move. It's not like they've been a horrible team. They've just sustained an insane amount of injuries. Let's see, is DK a better or worse trade candidate after the latest ejection? I don't think it changes anything really. So obviously you've seen how dynamic of a player DK is, right? One of the fastest guys in the league, hands down. Just an absolute monster of a human. But yeah, I mean, there's elements of the game that you don't love, and a lot of that is the penalties that he gets. He's been ejected a couple of times now, so there's some of that you have to take caution on. But the thing that's good about it is this is his first team, so there's always going to be another team that's like, oh, I can fix him, right? Look at Diggs. He gets out of Minnesota, goes to the Bills, and it worked there for a couple of years, but it's kind of not really working there anymore. So another team may pick him up and be like, we can change him, and they won't be able to. But what it does do is it means that the trade value for him, because of just how insane of an athlete that he is, somebody's going to give up some decent draft capital to go get him. And it's something that I feel like the Hawks should probably end up doing. It gets them some of their cap space back. They'll get some extra picks out of it. And, at the end of the day, they haven't really been able to utilize DK the way that they would want to anyway, because they just haven't had the time to throw the ball. And it's not like they use DK as a Debo. If they did, that would be amazing. But they don't. They really use him to stretch the field. And if you have barely 2 seconds to throw the ball, that play just never has time to develop. So does it hurt his trade value getting ejected? Probably not really, only because it's the first stop. If this was his second stop, he had a history of it, he's doing it again, that all of a sudden makes a huge difference in your trade value. But being the first, going from the first place to the second place, no, I would say he probably has a he probably has a good trade value still. Do I think the Eagles are going to come stronger than normal after their recent loss to the Niners? So not really. The thing about the Eagles is they really haven't played great football. They've found ways to win, right? Can't fault them for that. The Vikings did something similar last year, although I think the Eagles are a far better team than that Vikings team. But do I think they come prepared? Sure, absolutely. But there's just something off about this team, and it kind of has been all season, even in wins, right? They've sort of backed into wins or lucked into some situations. Now, there's still things they do exceedingly well, but they don't really have that swagger on offense that they did last year, despite the fact that they brought most of their people back. Their defense hasn't looked quite the same. Now, there was a lot of turnover on their defense, but they basically brought half of Georgia's national title team in. So it's not like they brought in some bad players. They got a lot of guys that can do good things on defense. So this is a game that's actually going to be a lot of fun. I love that this is the first game flexed into Monday night. This should be a battle the whole way. Do I think the Eagles win? Probably. The analyst side of me says they probably do. Now the Hawks need this game in a huge way. Really, they have to win out at this point, but they really need this game. They got to stop the bleeding. This would be a good win against a playoff caliber team. And so they definitely need it. But do I think the Eagles are going to come out stronger? No, I think, well, we'll get into some of the keys of the game when we, towards the end here. But I don't know that they come in stronger than normal, but they're going to come ready to play for sure. All right. So we got, do they make a move? Do they move on from Jamal Adams after this season? Do I agree with Holmgren? So Holmgren's statement essentially said, despite the fact that he's a good player, sometimes as a coach, you have to, make the decision to move on. Paraphrasing, obviously, it's not a direct quote. But, yeah, honestly, you free up some cap space. They do have an out after this season anyway. He hasn't been great. Obviously, in coverage, he's a liability. I mean, he has moments where you see things where you're like, oh man, that's that guy. That's the guy, right? Like that's the guy they went and got, and that's what they gave all those picks for. And he's not consistently that guy, and I haven't seen anything that says he's gonna be. Obviously he's been a little bit healthier this year, although he has been banged up a couple of times already. So it's not like he's been out there every game either. So at some point, yeah, you have to rip the Band-Aid off. It's sort of that Rashad Penny, right? They kept bringing him back because his upside is amazing, right? It's just he's never available. And so at some point, you just have to be like, okay, you know what? Joke's on us. Your athletic ability is fantastic, but your availability makes it so that we're just kind of burning a roster spot. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, based on what we've seen out of Jamal Adams, the missed coverages, missed tackles, the time out, the fact that there's an out in his contract after this season. Yeah, I mean, this is probably where you go ahead and move on. I don't know if they do, but it would make sense if they do. Let's see. Do I agree with KJ Wright on Pete has lost the locker room? So I didn't actually see this quote. So this is one that got sent to me this morning just before coming on screen. So this is one I'm not actually familiar with what the quote was. So I'm not sure if he was saying that he has lost it or he thinks he might be losing it. Again, I don't know what the direct quote is, so I don't want to get too far into that just because I don't want to address a quote that I didn't see because I might be misinterpreting just how it was asked to me. That being said, do I think Pete has lost the locker room? I can't speak for KJ, but on my end, I don't think that he has, although I think there's some real frustration in the building. And some of that is, that just comes with losing. Right? Like if you've ever played football and you've been on a winning team and a losing team, the attitude of a team that's losing isn't great, especially if the message in the room hasn't changed a lot. Right? It's one of the things that I talked about a couple weeks ago is, I got asked what was the most frustrating presser type of thing. And for me, it was always we have to do better. It's like, yeah, we know you have to do better. You lost. Like, clearly we have to do better. What are we going to do better to move forward? Like that's what we want to hear, right? Like we're not sitting on the other side of that microphone waiting for an answer for you to be like, oh yeah, we need to do better. Yeah, of course, obviously, right? So that's one of those, give us some information. Like, what are you doing to get better? Right? Like that's the information we want. That's what we want to write, right? When we come on camera or when we're, writing an article or anything like that, like that's what we want to write about. That's what we want to hear. We want to know how you're going to move forward. Like, how are we regaining the trust of the locker room? How are we going to move forward? Are we doing things to help, fix offensive line injuries or, all of those are the things that, media wants to hear. Right? We don't want to hear the cliche, we got to do better, I got to do better. Like, of course, an L's an L, right? So everyone has to do better when you lose. So do I think he's lost the locker room? No, it's a young enough locker room. I don't think that's really the issue. I think they just have a lot of injuries and things really just kind of aren't going their way. But I will look up at that KJ Wright quote. But again, I just didn't see it prior to getting on camera this morning. All right. Let's see. Can they still make the playoffs? So they can. There's a path for them to make the playoffs. The biggest part of it is they have to win out. Like they've dropped enough games at this point. Before the season, I said they'd be a 10-7 wild card team. And the way that the teams are playing right now, it looks like you're going to need to be 10-7 to get in. And mostly because the Seahawks don't own the tiebreakers against other teams. So they lost twice to the Niners. The Niners were going to win the division anyway. But those losses will matter. So then you look at the Rams. They lose both of those games against the Rams. Well, the Rams and the Hawks have the same record, right? So they don't have the tiebreaker head-to-head against them. So they actually have to win more games to get ahead of the Rams anyway. But when you look further into it, well, now you have teams like Green Bay that also have the same record. Well, the Hawks have more conference losses, right? So then now Green Bay would have that tiebreaker. So there's parts of this that becomes out of their control. So they basically have to win out, and then they're going to need some teams to lose some games. So they got to go 4-0 the rest of the way, and they need the Rams to at least drop one game. They probably need Green Bay to drop a game or two. So, I mean, they don't really control their own destiny anymore at this point. They really have to win. Now, do I think that Green Bay and the Rams go 4-0 from here? I don't. And so in that instance, they do control their own destiny. But, I mean, again, they have to go 4-0. It starts this Monday going 1-0, obviously. Now, that's that ultimate cliche. You got to go 1-0. But in this case, every game is a playoff game. So you have to go 1-0. Like, that's when that saying really carries some weight is, you know, as soon as you are in playoff football mode, you have to go 1-0 because it's one and done. Now, we're in the regular season still, but if they lose any more games, it's kind of over anyway. So this is one where they can still get in, but they got the work cut out for them. All right. Bobby Wagner, one of the 8 finalists for the Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award. You know, couldn't happen to a better guy. Bobby Wagner's such a good dude. So not only is he one of the 8 finalists for the Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award, but he's also the nominee for the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award for the Hawks. So, I mean, gotta love this for Bobby Wagner, especially leaving and coming back. And, you know, it's awesome to see him get some of this recognition again. Such a nice guy. So, yeah, great to see that for him. Hope he wins them both. All right. Do they try to get Browning, Fields, or another free agent instead of drafting a QB? I doubt it. Now, I've heard a lot of chatter about people wanting them to try and bring Browning home, right? Because he played for Washington, and he's played well for the Bengals the last couple of weeks. But, you know, let's calm down a little bit. It's been 2 starts. A lot of backups have a couple of good games when they come in because nobody has tape on them, right? So let's calm down on some of that. As far as Browning, let's see how he does the rest of the season. And, you know, if he's balling out, then, you know, sure, that could be an option you look at. Although they may want to try and keep him because at the end of the day, Burrow has gotten hurt a fair amount of times. So, you know, I don't know that they would be willing to give up Browning based on the level that he's been playing and the fact that Burrow has gotten hurt a few times. So do I think they go after him? Probably not. They definitely don't go after Fields. I can't imagine that they would want to give up the draft capital to go get him. And he doesn't really do what the Hawks want him to do anyway. Now, we've already seen how he is behind a bad offensive line. Unfortunately, currently that's what we have. So if he can't get the ball down the field where he's at, I don't really see anything that makes me think he'd be better here. And they'd have to give up a ton to go get him. So I don't think Fields is really an option. I definitely wouldn't want him as a Seahawk fan, but you know, who knows what the front office is looking at, or another free agent. You know, it's tough to say. It depends on who's available. But at this point, I think they stick with Geno. Probably makes more sense for them to keep Geno, draft a guy. Because, I mean, you got to remember this draft is actually pretty deep with quarterbacks and good quarterbacks, right? I mean, you got guys that can sling the ball around. Now, do I think that Penix will still be around? I don't know. They'll probably pick a little too low to be able to pick up Penix. But Bo Nix will probably still be on the table. And there's a couple other guys that would probably be, you know, mid to late second round, maybe even a third round pick that are still quality quarterbacks. So do I think they ultimately draft somebody, probably move on from Locke, keep Geno, sit whatever rookie quarterback they get, and, you know, let Geno kind of mentor them and bring them along. That's kind of really how I see the offseason going for, this particular Hawks team, just because Geno has played well enough. And if you get, one of these rookies that doesn't have to start immediately, that you can kind of bring along, Geno's a good guy to do that. He sat behind other really talented quarterbacks. He is good at what he does, right? He's good at reading the field. He's good at protecting the football. These are all things that are great to teach the guy that's coming in behind you. So this is one where I think they keep Geno. Locke ends up, maybe going away, and they draft a guy. That's probably the route they take. All right. Let's see. We got, am I worried about the next owners might try and move the Hawks? So no, the Hawks have had a little bit too much success for a new owner to try and move them. Usually if an owner is going to try and move them, they're usually getting a franchise that isn't winning. They're getting one where ticket sales are way down. And then they sabotage the team, kind of like what was happening in Oakland for the A's, right? Like they were just actively trying to lose games so they can try and move that team. So I don't see that happening. Plus, because of, the Allen group, I really think that'll be a stipulation in the sale, is that it remains in Seattle. I can't imagine they would sell it to somebody that's going to try and move them. Obviously, you can end up with Ken Behring type of things where they're trying to move them in the middle of the night down to LA and, stuff like that. So anything's possible, but I believe that this will be something where it'll be stipulated in the contract that they have to stay in Seattle. Plus, I don't know that the NFL would approve a move as successful as Seattle has been and as loyal as the fan base is. That would be a real surprise for them to try and move them now. When they tried to, when they tried to sneak them down to LA, the Hawks weren't very good at the time, right? So it was a very different situation. This is one where the stadium is sold out all the time. There's a huge, it's like a 10-year waiting list for tickets. So it's a very different situation from then to now. All right. Do they bring Locke back? Well, that's the real question, isn't it? Because if they're going to end up drafting a guy, then bringing Locke back probably doesn't make a ton of sense. Just because I think he would be offered more money somewhere else. Quality backups, they're hard to get. So someone would be willing to give him some money. And it's not like Locke is a bad quarterback. He just happens to be a little looser with the football, which is why he throws more picks. So do they bring him back? It really depends on what it is they do in the draft. If they draft a quarterback, they probably don't bring him back. They probably keep one of the other guys that they've had kind of in and out of the roster or on the practice squad, because, again, you're going to have two guys ahead of Locke. I don't know that Locke would want to stay for that either. Locke signed a 1-year deal, so he is absolutely, if that was going to be the situation, he may just say, nah, no thanks, I'm going to try out free agency. So unless they were going to bring him back as the number 2, because he does seem to like being here, I think he probably moves on. Does Geno start after the groin injury? So he did the walkthrough on Thursday morning, and then he did do some of practice Thursday afternoon. So he's eligible to play. I would believe he's going to try and play. So, but we'll see, right? It's going to depend on game day. Obviously, he has a few more days to get ready for this game because it got flexed onto Monday night. So it gives him an extra day to, recover and get ready. So my feeling is he will probably end up playing. Will he be 100%? I doubt it. Groin injuries are, they're zero fun. They tend to linger. It's really going to come down to, is it uncomfortable to the point where he's not getting quite as much push on the ball, right? Because a lot of your throwing power is through the legs, right? It's footwork, drive to to sling the ball, and if you have some of that discomfort, it can take some of the power off the ball. Maybe not in the beginning of the game, but as the game continues on, if it starts to tense up, you start to get tired. It definitely will change the way he throws. So, it'll depend on how much it's healed prior to game time. But everything indicates that it looks like he'll get on the field. And let's be honest, he does give you your best shot to win. At the end of the day, Drew Lock, although, an effective backup, and a lot of people are like, oh, Geno's only an effective backup. Well, he's our starter. So, he's had more of those first team reps. So anybody that can be out there that has more reps and more chemistry with your receiving, core, obviously that's good. So, yeah, we'll see, but everything indicates that Geno should start, which, again, the more starters you can have on the field, especially against a really good team like the Eagles, is where you want to be. All right. Okay, what do I think about the Eagles having dropped the last 7 to the Hawks? Well, I mean, they don't play each other a ton, but, that's I think the stat on it was like 15 years. So be careful with streaks, especially if they talk about it a lot. For whatever reason, commentators, there always seems to be that like media jinx. It's like, oh yeah, this kicker's made 35 in a row. It's like, cool. He's going to miss this one. So thanks for that. Just, wait till after he kicks and be like, oh yeah, that's his 36th in a row, right? Like, I mean, whether you believe in jinxes or not, it's weird that it happens a lot. All right, let's talk about these Eagles. So like I said a little bit earlier to Mike, the Eagles haven't been a great team thus far in the season. Now, what's scary about that is they have all the pieces to be a great team. So the fact that they haven't played their best football means there's room for improvement, and you never know which week that's going to become a thing, right? So you can't look at what they've done and be like, oh yeah, that's who they are. I mean, and they very well might be. Maybe this is as good as this team's going to be this year, but they have the pieces to be better than they are. They've just kind of played some sloppy football, and that will help on the end of the Seahawks, because one of the keys to this game for me is the defense. The defense has been a little bit of a liability, and the things that the Eagles do well are some of the things that the Hawks don't necessarily block up very well. They do a lot of throws to the flat, and if we saw anything from the Cowboys, that is a weakness. If you got a good toss to the flat, you can put up a lot of yards. Obviously, the middle of the field has been an issue. The running game, blocking up the running game, has been an issue. And, probably one of the biggest things in my mind for this, because they have such a great quarterback sneak, or, tush push, or whatever you guys want to call it. It's a quarterback sneak at the end of the day. But they do that so well, and they can do it, 2 to 3 yards away, right? I mean, they were only doing it from 1 yard, but we watched them push. They were on the 2.5, and they ended up being 3 yards into the end zone on that thing. So one of the biggest keys for this defense, and really keys for the game just in general, if they to try and win, is they have to win on first and second down. They can't let them be third and short, because this team isn't set up to stop that. We haven't seen anybody effectively stop it anyway, but this team really isn't set up to stop that as it's laid out right now. So they need to be able to have, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 7, like that. That's really what they need, especially for a team that really hasn't been good at getting off the field on third down. They can't give up these short third downs that they've given a lot of teams, through the season so far. But that is probably the biggest thing for me, is winning first and second down. If they're going to win, that's where they need to win. Obviously, they got to be able to shut down A.J. Brown. Some of that is going to have to come from the pass rush. A.J. Brown is such a dynamic receiver that, as good as our secondary is, if Hurts has time, that's going to be a real problem. So our pass rush has to be able to get home, even if it's not sacks. They gotta hit him. They got to disrupt the pass. You're going to need your outside linebacker to be really good on contain, though, because you can't let Hurts be able to get out and crush you with his legs, because he can. So the front, that defensive front, has a lot of work to do going against this Eagles team. And, where you start to worry about it is late in the third and fourth quarter, because as you start to get tired, they just have some big guys, right? And you got Jalen Hurts that, they say he squats 600 pounds. Like that's an insane number. And if you have your defensive line and your linebackers starting to get tired, all of a sudden those, 1 or 2 yard scrambles become 5 and 6 yard scrambles, right? So some of those things become a real issue. So they have to win first and second down, and they got to be able to try and limit what A.J. Brown can do to you. And of course, on offense, they got to be able to convert on third down. Last week, I believe they were 2 of 11, right? So, I mean, they're on third down. They can't convert. They haven't been able to all season. So this is going to be one of those where they really need to turn it around. They're going to have to be able to convert against this team to stay in this game. Again, this is going to be one that's going to be a battle the whole way. But they're going to have to correct some things that they've done that they haven't done well throughout the season. They're going to have to correct those to be able to hang with this Eagles team, because although they have lost the last two, they're not a bad team. So let's see. And of course, Geno's going to be the real question mark. Is he going to be ready to go? Again, he has an extra day to heal, and he was at practice yesterday. I believe they're going to have one more practice today, and then he's going to have a little bit of time off. They're going to do walkthrough stuff like that. So hopefully he'll be ready to rock. They're going to need Geno's best, because the Eagles, at the end of the day, even though their defense hasn't played quite as well as it did last year, they still have a formidable defense. There's a reason that this Eagles team, despite having ugly wins, we're 10-1 at one point. So that's kind of the biggest things for me there. Excuse me. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. Again, as we wrap up our show here, thanks again for tuning in. If you like the content, be sure to like and subscribe. If you're watching on Roku, be sure to stay in the next hour for the next part of your programming. And of course, like I said at the beginning of the show, if there's any coffee sponsors that want to advertise, I drink a lot of coffee, so I'm here for it. And yeah, all right. Well, enjoy the rest of your Friday. I'm actually jumping on with another show, going to talk about the Eagles and Seahawks showdown on Monday night. Other than that, you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday. Take it easy, guys.